First of all, welcome news, of course, that exams are going to go ahead. What do you think about this idea that actually pupils will be given advance notice of some of the topics and also will be graded more generously than in previous years?
I do welcome that exams are taking place. I support the general thrust of the government's proposals because we know that there have been many thousands of children who've missed school over the past 2 years. There are a couple of elephants in the room which I think are quite important to consider. The one problem with the government's proposals is, in essence, what they're saying is that everyone can start the race and the race is going to be half the size as normal. But that doesn't solve the problem for disadvantaged students who've been learning the least during the pandemic, during the time when schools were shut down. And the answer to that is the catch-up programme. But the problem is the catch-up programme, whilst very welcome, £5 billion, is not reaching the most disadvantaged, and there are huge regional disparities. The second elephant in the room is that there are, according to the Centre for Social Justice report that was published last week, 13,000 children in year 11 who have mostly not returned to school. So that's a crucial exam year. They've mostly not returned to school since schools were reopened last March. And that is very worrying. So the government needs to do a lot more and appoint, in my view, thousands of attendance advisors working with the schools and families to get these kids back to school and learning again.
Yeah, extraordinary that, actually. I want to pick up on that point because I've read this before, that tens of thousands, I think, of people across the country have almost disappeared off the register, of the school register. Do we know why that is, why that's happened?
Well, the Social Justice has estimated that over 100,000 is growing. Children have mostly not returned to school. Mostly means over 50% of the time. It's hard to know all the reasons. It could be they've moved areas and they've dropped off the radar. It could be that they've gone from primary to secondary school. It could be that they're getting home education, but of course we don't have a register yet of home educated children. But it's a very worrying situation because we have hundreds of schools where whole classes, in essence, are just missing, vanished into thin air. And as I say, 13,000 of those children are in year 11 in a crucial exam year. And I'd like to see the government not just get these kids back to school, but also do an audit of almost every child, working with schools and local authorities to see how much, those in exam years, see how much lost learning there's been and how much catch up is needed, and make sure the catch-up programme reaches those children.
Also, we all know that the pandemic's had a massive impact, hasn't it, Robert, on pupils' mental health. There's a report out today by England's Children's Commissioner citing big differences depending on where pupils live. I mean, is the government doing enough to address this? And frankly, if not, what needs to be done?
Well, we already had problems, ever-rising problems with children and mental health, and I welcome what the Children's Commissioner has said today. I opposed almost from day one the schools closing for most pupils because one of the reasons I was worried about the impact on children's mental health, and it has been nothing short of a disaster. You know, mental health referrals amongst children have gone up by 60%. We know that eating disorders amongst young girls went up by 400% during lockdown. The grim statistics are all to see. And I'd like to see the government accelerate the programme to put mental health counsellors in almost every school in the country. I think social media does, although I'm very, enjoy using it just like everybody else, I think social media does a lot of damage to children. I've suggested in Parliament last week that you would have a 2% tax on social media companies like TikTok, for example, and Instagram, which we know have caused a lot of children to have mental health problems. Those kind of social media organisations, a 2% tax which would raise 100 million to then teach children mental health resilience. And I also think what the government needs to do is look seriously, like they are in Wales, at extending the school day. So that's not to learn algebra till 8 o'clock at night, but do mental resilience activities, sporting, creative activities, that all the statistics show that we help children's mental health as well as increasing their educational attainment.
I mean, not to defend social media companies, but I'm sure they and others would point out that they have at least also helped people stay in touch with one another during times in which they've been apart at school. But I also want to touch on this subject that we saw in the Sunday Times yesterday, Labour asking for an urgent question. This idea that private schools have been massively inflating their grades compared to pre-COVID times, particularly compared to state schools. I mean, this seems like it's a proper big scandal, actually.
Yes, and I said to the Sunday Times yesterday that there should be a inquiry by Ofqual, because what these schools appear to have done, by the way, I'm supportive of private schools. My father came here as an immigrant to this country and worked day and night to send me to a private school. I was very lucky. But what these some of them appear to have done, we've got to look at the evidence, is to bake a ginormous rock cake of grade inflation into the system, manipulate the system, game the system, which means that students got higher grades, which means they took some of the best places for university, which also means that those state school pupils or state schools which didn't game the system in the same way were denied those places. And that is wrong. We should have a level playing field for everyone. Everyone should have a chance to climb the ladder of opportunity. Pupils in private schools already privileged. It's not acceptable if there has been gaming of the exam system. And Ofqual needs to mount a serious inquiry, that's the exams regulator, to find out what on earth has been going on.
Yeah, it seems pretty extraordinary stuff. Robert, just before we let you go, touch of politics as well, in some ways, in the purest form of it. Steve Barclay is now coming into number 10. He's got 3 jobs, as well as being Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister. He's obviously at the Cabinet Office and an MP. Is he able to do all 3?
Well, I welcome the changes they've announced so far. I know Steve Barclay, he's very credible. He's very intelligent. He's an organiser. I think he'll be able to do the job. His other responsibilities, as I understand it, are being allocated amongst other Cabinet Office ministers. But I think because he knows all of us, he's an MP himself, I actually think that will benefit the government, because it means that MPs can feed directly through to him. He understands the politics. He understands what it's like to be out on the streets hearing from residents day in, day out about their concerns. So I think it's a good appointment by the Prime Minister.